In reality, I think the most important thing is to understand what your board and investors are
Yeah.
looking for. GRR is the truth serum for business health.
I
There you go.
love that.
And I think we're at that stage now where, you're PE backed, you're growing well, you're looking forward into your next growth phase. And I can't be poacher gamekeeper, right? I can't have the revenue or the bookings team and the sales team report to me and then I sign off discount and margin approvals. In reality, I think the most important thing is to understand what your board and investors are looking for.
Good morning, well, afternoon now, Keith, and welcome to Newell Podcast. Of course, I know all about your background and your current role, but just for the sake of our listeners, before we dive into some really awesome topics, would love just to hear your background, your current role, and just give us a little bit of an introduction on yourself.
Yeah, no, that's great, and thanks for having me today. I think, unfortunately, too many decades being in tech and running go-to-markets, whether that was from sort of blue chips such as Microsoft in emerging regions and established regions. I was back at Sage Group in the ERP days, so I think I can use nearly every acronym now, right? ERP, CRM, HCM, GRC, and then I've done fintech and legal tech. So today it's a great role. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Moray. So Moray is a PE-backed legal tech business. So really servicing everything from corporate legal to law firms across their stack and needs, and of course helping them with their journeys with the very topical AI.
Yeah, oh my goodness. Okay, I love this. This is crazy. I always say to my friends, like, if I'm talking to someone in my space, we speak in like another language. And then my friends are just like, I don't really get what you're
That's
saying.
right.
From like all these, even back to like ICP, IPP, all of that kind of stuff's hilarious. You almost need a dictionary. Um,
Absolutely.
okay, love it. So how long have you been at your current role?
So in the current role for coming up to 8 months now. So really bringing together a number of acquisitions and
Love it.
getting us ready for what would be true global go-to-markets and very aligned execution. And that's what we've been working on the last couple of months as we get ready for the new year.
Yeah, I love that. 8 months is such an interesting time because like the turnover for even like sales executives, etc., I think it's something at like 12 to 18 months at the minute. So just like what I'd love to, well, there's loads of topics we can talk about, but what I really want to cover is in that 8 months, because I find this really interesting, when you're looking at like if you were hiring a CRO, say you weren't a CRO, what are those like best things to do in that first 8 months to get the quickest wins, but also just kind of like learn the most about the business, almost like that onboarding 8 months, because it takes some time, right? And it's like almost like crucial and pivotal that first like 4 to 8 months. So how's that been for you? And like if you were hiring for that role, what does that look like in terms of best practice?
Yeah, I think people always talk 30, 60, 90s, right? Which
Yeah.
is the standard. And we all do beautiful PowerPoints that everyone can sign off for your MBOs and whatever else, but through your appointment. And they'll always be a little impatient. And I think that's something that what you need to do is you need to find out quickly. And it doesn't take too long for experienced leaders to find out quickly where can you move the needle and
Yeah.
show improvement. And something I worked on very quickly was, whilst we were building new websites, nurture journeys, totally different approach to digital marketing, turning all of that on, that's a slow burn, right?
Yes.
Then you look at, well, what can I do quickly? Now, also, we were spinning up a global BDR team. Now, that's also a slow burn. You've got to put in tech, you've got to hire, you've got to train, you've got to enable. So I thought, well, how can I move quickly? And I just go back to some simple basics that you can fundamentally control, which is sales prospected pipeline. And this sounds so simple, but to be able to sit in front of your board and investors and say, listen, I'm going to move the needle on pipe next quarter by 80 to 100%. And I'm going to show you where we're generating it in which products, because we understand the velocity in those products and the margins and what we do. And that is totally under your control because now you're executing a sales force to
Yeah.
do what you need them to do whilst you're building that entire ecosystem. So that was like quite a cool example from where I sat. But I guess it will just totally depend where you come in. And within 30 days, an experienced leader should be able to understand with some great meetings and some good discovery questions and a lot of listening. That's the key bit, right? Okay, where can I move this needle in the first 3 months? And then the second 3 months, effectively is progressing from what you're building in the first three. So within 30 days, I knew what my 12-month strategy was going to be. I knew what we had to fix. And then, from experience, you'll know when you're fixing that, when does impact arrive? And so if I was looking as CRO today, sure, you're going to say, okay, well, what are your key metrics? What did you do on growth on bookings? How was your GRR on your book, et cetera, et cetera. But the reality is it's how fast can you learn a business and how fast can you show impact against that?
Really interesting about what you just said then is in the first 30 days. I actually think with the CRO role, because I've actually hired for the CEO role a couple of times, and I think it's the exact same as hiring for a sales role in the sense that if I was an account executive going into a role and if I was a CRO going into a role, the number one thing that I'd be doing in the first 30 days is just speaking to as many customers as possible. And then on top of that, speaking to the people that didn't close and why they didn't close. So I
Yep,
would almost do that within the first 30 days. And I think some people just forget that. And I think there's not such an emphasis on that. And on top of that, building those quick impact and then that longer. I just love how you're looking at that because it's like the customers will give you the answers that you need for almost what will dictate that 30 to 60, 90 or whatever days.
exactly. And I think you've also got that glorious period of time, which I'm kind of moving out of now.
Yeah, I
You
was
can
gonna.
be an idiot, right? You can literally say, I don't understand this part of the business. I don't understand how
Yeah,
a legal operations leader thinks about their systems. Help me understand, what is the value you're getting from us as a business? Where could we do better? You have that luxury for a period of time before they think, you should know. And I
yeah,
think I think what we did as well was I set myself a timeline. And again, collection of really good acquisitions coming into one structure globally. And then you've got to redo messaging,
yeah,
right? Then
yeah,
you've got to
yeah, of
sit there and say, right, well, how would I talk to executive buyers? And
course.
how does that message come across? And I think that was our sort of second quarter deliverable was to say, now we understand what we're selling, who we're selling to, etc. How do we talk about ourselves? How do we change that narrative? And I actually made a video. I hate PowerPoints, but we did a little six slider for the sales team on how to talk about Moray. And then I did a recording of like the exec script and how I would land that message and sent it to the board and the investors.
That.
Kind of say, here's Moray. We call it Moray 3.0 because we did 2.0. We're 10 years old, so now it's 3.0. But that's how, you've got to just pick those deliverables and that has real amplification across the business.
Yeah, I really want to talk about this is great. Like so I get so I could speak about this all day. I want to talk about this elements around you that you need for you to be successful. But just before we do, I'd love to just pick up the BDR comment at the start and then explaining to the board that you're going to increase pipeline by X amount of metrics. I've also been in front of boards and raised capital, and it's like expectation versus reality is the only thing that's ever going to make the CR role like a real challenge here. So when you're looking at the BDR role and then you're basically giving them the expectations of this pipeline increase, what are
Mm.
you actually doing to build that side of the business? Is this you're hiring a bunch of SDRs and you're going outbound? Is this more like organic marketing, or, which I absolutely love, are you leveraging like referrals, word of mouth, and kind of upselling through existing clients? Like, what does that look like in your world, and how are you thinking about it to deliver on those metrics?
Yeah, I mean, you've nailed it, Laura, right? What you've got to understand is what are your sources of funnel? And
Exactly.
then what is your influence in those sources and what's the slower and the faster burn? So when you think about the BDR, like I say, I mean, we call them BDR, SDR, one's outbound, one's inbound, and they
Okay.
kind of usually catch both, right? But we're very specific on our new logo acquisition out
Okay.
of that BDR funnel. So when I think of it and I'm building a model, you're really building, once you've understood your sell prices, you've understood your velocity, you've understood your win rates, right? You can then put it into the source. Now, those sources will have very different win rates. Your
Yeah, of course.
BDR win rate is generally a lot lower than a sales prospected. And a
Yeah.
sales prospected is generally a lot lower than a referral from within the business, right? Which is generally very well qualified. So I look at it across those boxes and I do split marketing into hot and scored because they are very different and they behave very differently and they do have very different win rates. So, I look at it like that and say, between 50 and 60%, I kind of put on sales leaders' heads, AEs' heads, right? Go generate your pipe. You've got your target accounts, you've got your territory, you've got a bag full of products, go sell. Then you think about the BDR mix is probably about 15% today.
Okay.
Industry average would be 6 opportunities per BDR per month. I'm kind of leveling it at 4.5, 5, give a bit of space. And then you think of marketing 20% as we're building that engine. And then the rest is coming really from referrals. I mean, we have 1,000 people out every day with customers, just good conversations there. And those tend to move very quickly, which is fabulous. So that's how I think about those different pillars that generate the demand for us. And the one you could easily control was sales prospected.
Yeah, 100%. I love this because there's two things that, and I'd love your opinion on this as well. But when we raised capital back in my early 20s, the two things that seemed to just be, and it was a very different selling time back then, but like the two things that kept coming up was lead diversification to the top of the funnel. So, okay, yeah, you might be excellent in one area, but that's almost like redundant if you're not like at least average in all the others. And the other was just like the NDR, the customer like metric on the back end. But having that diversification at the top is almost like what we coach and educate businesses on, because that will like save you, because no matter what happens, it's always going to come back to that. Like it's always going to come back to that. Like you do not have a business unless you have that level of pipeline.
Correct. And sorry, carry on, Laura.
No, you go.
No, and I was it just made me think of a point that when I came into the business, I was blessed, and you would be as well, with the networks that we've been involved in, and the level of people that you interact with, and the number of startups and ideas today is insane, as you know,
Yeah.
coming out the West Coast. But we were working with Buyer Journey.
Yeah.
Now, I had no idea what our buyer journey looked like versus, let's say, our top 4 competitors. Right. And if I go into the solution suites, we have a lot of competitors at the solution level, but at the all up level, say 3 or 4 globally. And so we use this piece of software that basically tracked the buyer journey. We trained the ICP, which was basically a synthetic AI bot that we trained ourselves into the different ICPs. And then it just goes out and spends a couple of months wandering around the internet, in our competitors, in us, judging them the whole way through the buyer journey. And the piece that made a lot of sense to me was when you kind of hit the salesperson, that's very easy to control. But the learnings I got from it was we were having phenomenal footprint into our website, like phenomenal over our competitors. But guess what? We weren't catching it in a way that were organized down to the BDR to catch for the IM to generate the pipe. So that was quite an easy one. That's why I invested in the BDRs quickly. And the other piece was we had an inconsistent journey as the sales reps got involved. And that made perfect sense to me, because guess what? We came from 5 different companies. So you would have an inconsistent journey. So then you just took those two things, and those two things, we've already seen a continued uptick around win rates and pipe.
It's honestly insane, just that level of data, what that can give to you, and how quick wins that you can create in a business's top line revenue just from amending those things within a buyer's journey, but also that prospecting element.
Absolutely. It's insane.
It's super interesting what you say about the referrals, because I came from a world where we were like, you can't predictably scale through referrals, like word of mouth, like it's not enough alone and you need the other elements. And you absolutely do. But just going back to something you touched on about them being quick, it's almost like the cheat code to scaling a business, because if you're coming through referral, the trust is there. And realistically, the trust is the main thing that the buyer needs in the journey anyway. They need to be validated. They need to be like, they need to trust you, and they need to understand that this is going to be a benefit to them. But if you've got that, you've got a referral, it accelerates the deal by honestly like 3 to 4x.
It's huge. And the other thing we did was, if you've got 1,000 people out there, I don't need 1,000 licenses for my CRM system to log a lead, right? So I'm quite blessed with we have a really strong dev team in stuff that we do, and they just knocked up an app for us that's an internal app that not only understands the customer, right, but it understands the kind of universe around it. It almost does a bit of product suggestion into the accounts, but then when there's that conversation, it's literally pick up the phone, fill in the details, off it goes. And it goes 2 ways, of course. It heads off into the relevant AE based on the target account. And the flip side is it adds those people into the referral gamification, top of the list. You're going to get a spiff end of quarter, naming lights, all the usual stuff that generate that enthusiasm around leads and referrals.
I love it. This is awesome. I'm honestly loving this because I'm actually learning so much. So just pivoting the conversation a little bit, because I'd really love to understand your world and where the business is in this element. When you look at the sales team or even the go-to-market team, like anyone with a revenue number, right, which can be literally everyone, to be honest. But when you look at like we always see, and I've seen this a lot, is people will over index on the talent, right? So you'll have amazing people, but then there's like what we call the vehicle around them. So the vehicle being all the processes, playbook. I literally hate the word playbooks, but the infrastructure around them to be able to, for them to execute, i.e., Lewis Hamilton isn't winning the F1 in a Ford Fiesta, right? So when you look at, you've been there 8 months now, what is going on within your world just to make sure the team have everything they need, they're coached adequately? Because when I came from the B2B SaaS world, you were lucky to get like one Gong recording a month, right? When you're an AE. And then
Yeah.
I pivoted, and this is why I bring up this question. Then I pivoted to the coaches and consultancy space with like, I was working alongside like Tony Robbins, Grant Cardone, that world. And their sales leadership were literally giving the team call reviews 24/7. That was their number one priority. What I find in like the B2B SaaS corporate world is that's not so much the leader's priority coaching down. There's a lot of other things that need to be going on. So like, what are you guys doing to make sure that the go-to-market team have the infrastructure, have the coaching, have absolutely everything they need to be able to hit their number that you're putting on them?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things to break that out is so firstly, you have to be really super clear on what your plays are,
Yeah.
right? And we have a collection of products that are working the ways into 7 sales plays. I mean, 7 still might feel like a lot, but globally that's fine, and they will be prioritized. Now, within those sales plays, they do break out into what I would call sub plays. So you may, a great example is, let's put some names to it. I mean, we have a play called Resilience X, which is all about pre and post breach, pre-breach and post-breach cyber services, right? So it could be the pre-breach stuff is what have you got in place to protect yourself on ransomware, right? That can actually also be a single sales play. The flip side of it is that's part of a broader play where if you are breached, we have a team that can help you, et cetera, right? And there's about 20 services there. You can't market 20 services. So you kind of have the overall play, and then you can have some sub plays. Now, what's critical is driving the enablement on that. So we have an enablement team that's run by our strategy team that basically are producing content consistently. And starting with that master play is if you went and sat in a room with someone today from the exec, can you have an adequate conversation to generate interest and go find who the ICPs are in the business? That's job one. That's got to be across every sales rep, every CS rep, everybody. Then at the same time, the piece I've always found in my career is if I don't have that conversational intelligence coming back into the business, how can you coach? And that's could be deal-based coaching. It could be opportunity-based coaching. And so what we then do is we program Gong to listen for the keywords for the sales plays that we've agreed should be on cross-sell if they're speaking to a customer or new logo. And then I get the signals back. So then you can move directly into a review weekly, which is what we do, into the coaching around, okay, how many conversations did we have? We're trying to cross-sell X, Y, or Z. Did we have the right conversation? Did we hit the right ICP? What was the outcome? Can we train? Can we do that? That's like very important to me. The deal-based coaching is incredibly valuable, right?
Yes.
But we've always done that.
Cool.
This bit is the game-changing bit for me.
I completely agree. And you know what's funny? Well, it's not even that funny. It's like no one's doing that. Like genuinely, like the volume of CROs I speak to or the people that are we support, like this is all very new to them, which is almost why we exist, right? Is because that's exactly what we are so hot on what we coach downwards on. So it's awesome that you're doing that. And it's just so interesting that when you look at the go-to-market team, it's such a need to have it, and there is enablement here, but it's like so understaffed and it's so under prioritized. And now it feels like with AI, but more importantly, we're just like having to be like with the customers. Like it used to be all on net new business, right? And now it's like all on the customer. And having that focus really means people can actually drive more retention, drive expansion within the accounts, and everyone needs to be coached on that almost like sales mindset.
Absolutely. And I think that, and I think I also have CS trained at exactly the same level.
So good.
You have to.
You have to.
Otherwise, and then the other thing is I also find even in the new logo journey, by having that amazing experience in touch points 1, 2, and 3,
so good.
It just carries straight through, doesn't it? And if you miss that first couple of touch points with that level of expertise, insight, knowledge, whatever you want to call it, you're second best.
It's so interesting you say that because I'm working with a company at the minute that is a market research company, $100 million plus. And I know that all of their sales reps are just like ex-McKinsey, like super knowledgeable about the product. amazing. And I'm now training their sales reps on actually how to sell. I'm like, you run this best in class sales process, you'll beat all of your competition by just sales alone. Not
Yeah.
even your product, even though your product's amazing. But if you're giving that customer such an amazing journey where they're on a call, you're adding value, you're understanding their problems, and you're tying it back, and your admin's there and all of that kind of stuff, people will buy from you because they like you. And that will be like your ultimate competitive advantage, other than having to go to like a features and functions war.
You bang on, and I think the other thing that I'm starting to see is you're probably getting as much noise as I am around this. Certainly, the PEs are looking at GRR,
Mhm.
GDR, depending on where you are, as a really, really, really significant metric. And I think that's because we've got a lot of, we're back into startup phase, we're back into the raise phase, and then, is it growth at all cost, or is it high quality growth? And I think the interesting dynamic there is that by having an approach in a QBR MBR that is a
Yeah.
lot broader than maybe the subject matter or the solution they're using, you are creating a lot more stickiness and a lot more retention without you even realizing it. And, I think what someone said to me the other day, and I'm definitely going to steal it. Yes, GRR is the truth serum for business health.
I
There you go.
love that.
I know. I'm not going to say who it was because we can just pretend it was me now. That's fine.
Yeah, at uni when you used to like have to refer to the person, like, and then the date and then the name. Oh, it was all just tragic.
So yeah, that's something that I think we don't pay enough attention to
Yeah.
is the indirect impact of being great at those conversations.
100%. And then like the streamline, if you are doing exactly what you're doing, because again, I speak to all these people where their customer success reps, bless them, are just trained to do like quarterly check-ins or these reviews, and they're not adding the value that they need. But imagine if you have a sales process like that that's 10 out of 10 compared to your competitor, then they're passed over to a CS rep or an account manager rep or someone that's focused on customer, that's focused on getting the best value out of the job possible. It just makes the whole journey just like so slick. And no one wants to churn from accounts like that because it's actually so rare to have accounts like that.
It is exactly, and then the challenge is always, isn't it, Laura? Is how do you scale that? Like
Yeah.
that's not easy to scale, but that is part of this constant process where you help a lot of companies with as well. Is that's what you got to get right? Is take it from let's call it an embryonic approach, probably in a team or a region, and that has to then be consistent across the business globally.
And I think it's just the acceptance that it will break. At every point, it's going to break. And it's just about how you respond to that, how you react to that, and then what do you build to make sure it's not going to break for the next like couple of million run. But just going back onto scaling. So, look, I know we've spoken a bit of offline about this, so I want to bring it onto the podcast. But we've spoken a little bit about like the level of C-suite roles that you need to actually be and actually like take a business to where it needs to get right. So, in your position and what you're doing right now, what needs to be around you that you're working with your CEO or anyone across that like board or executives that allows you to do your job and doesn't mean that you're like doing absolutely everything, like just allows you to be the CRO?
Yeah, I think, when you think of it, and then we run, we really run bi-weeklies to make sure this is all lined up. So, in our business, you've got a very established technology
Yeah.
reseller business, right? And we add value there to make it sticky, usual stuff, AI, whatever else. And then you've got areas you're building product. So that's your CPO world. And then from there, you've got your strategy world, which is where is the market moving to? Are we catching that in product? And if we're aligned there, are we GTMing that in the right way, enabling and all of that? So I think the piece for me that is a role we've just introduced actually, and I think it's more than at the perfect time, is a chief operating officer.
Yeah, nice.
Now, understanding how a CRO and a COO interact, it actually became ridiculously simple. And
Just like most things,
I
but
thought
everyone
we thought it,
overcomplicates it.
yeah, I thought we thought it was going to be difficult, but actually, if you think about the flow as you do from all the effort to generate the pipe through to the bookings, through to the revenue, that's a whole process that is not a sales process. There's a sales process and there's almost a governance compliance process. And that's where a COO comes in, starting mapping those processes, building out those rules and processes on discounting, thinking through deal desk, thinking through all of that. How do we make sure an SOW is created from this amazing sales experience that is also easy to understand, easy to sell, shows us as a joined up business? And I think that piece of that governance will really help us maximize the bookings growth into the profit, right? That's the connection that I think we have. And so you have a lot of collaborative meetings, which is fantastic, but I don't I don't get involved in operations. Like, I'm out of there, right? I was looking after it because no one else was around at the time. But when you can give that to an experienced sales rev ops team, my gosh, everything's a pleasure from there, from territory planning to your comp planning to all of that. You're collaborating on it, and then it gives me the freedom to go do what I do, which is go execute that business and drive those bookings and do that enablement, do that training, make sure everyone's enabled, like I say, on like we were talking about, on the skill sets that are now required.
It's so interesting. I'm so glad we're talking about this because, like, I also think it massively depends at what stage the business is at, right? Because there's levels
Yeah.
that, if I was looking at the CRO role, there are levels of ops that I can do. By no means can I do it well, or someone that was going to be a CRO can do it way better than me. And I'm like, self-awareness is key, etc. I think there's times that you can take it and then you need to hand it over. But when you're able to hand it over at that perfect stage, I think it's just like almost the most pivotal part to then scaling successfully.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're at that stage now where, you're PE backed, you're growing well, you're looking forward into your next growth phase. And you can't, I can't be, what do they say? I can't be poacher gamekeeper, right? I can't have the revenue or the bookings team and the sales team report to me and then I sign off discount and margin approvals, right? It'd be nice,
Yeah.
but probably not correct. And I think just adding that to the business, and what I have noticed from the impact in just a few weeks is the level of confidence it
Yeah.
actually gives the whole way across the organization. Is
Really?
these are the structures we're putting in place, here's
Yeah.
why. And I bet you when we dig in, there's double digit wastage going on,
Of
right,
course.
in time and systems and whatever else. So I think that's going to be incredibly powerful for us.
I love this. I love this. So I know you mentioned the CPO of the product. What I would love to just like ask, and this has just like come up now, and I'm actually super intrigued by this, is where do you feel like, and I actually don't know the size of your customer team, etc., but
Mm.
obviously you're the CRO. Now, I speak to 50% of CROs have customer success report directly into them. 50% of CROs I have hired a CCO, Chief Customer Officer,
Yes.
to have the success team. But then it's a bit different because if the CS reps have that number, they are kind of like revenue and they should be treated like sales. And I believe, my personal opinion is that's what's going to drive the business forward. But where do you lie within that? So you have your CPO, your COO, you, and then what do you feel about that role? And like, do you feel like it's needed, but maybe in a few years, or like, I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback on that because I'm always in two minds.
Yeah. Firstly, CS does report into me because
Yeah,
I'm with you. I do see it as a key revenue,
yeah,
part of our revenue operating system. Let's be really clear. So the CS function is in with me. I don't think at the moment it's almost a little bit across all the solutions. They're very dominant on a couple because that's where the business grew from, right?
got
But
you.
as we go to the next level, and I would think in the next 12 to 18 months, that CCO role may become very, very relevant because
Interesting.
into the COO is service delivery, which is a massive number of people, a huge part of our business,
Right.
strong margins to manage. We've got offshore delivery, onshore delivery. It's a complex world, right? And I think that piece of it is an area that just has to be looked after. Then at the moment, the CS is good where it is.
Okay.
Uh, but I'm with you. 12 to 18 months, probably going to be the right time to bring in a chief customer officer.
I feel it's so interesting because the roles change so much. Like even in 5 to 10 years, the role of the customer success has changed so much. So when you're looking to hire that role, are you going to look so that it's more like revenue focused?
Yes. I mean, listen, today I look for there are some elements of what happens in our business that doesn't contribute to sales quota retirement, right? It just, overages on consumption in a deal sold 2 years ago, I'm not paying reps on, right? That's done through the consistent work that the CS team are doing with the customers because it's basically, their active usage is up, their consumption's up, we build them more. Great work. So I think from that point of view, and then I do believe strongly that a CS function has to have an umbrella, okay, of understanding I'm managing the relationship with the client. But then if I go to the next level down and these different solution suites we've got from technology to managed AI to information governance, they're all different ICPs actually. So
Yeah.
then you're then going to go down into the next level. And if you're going to have a great monthly review or a great quarterly review, you still need experts in the CS team on those subjects, right? So I do think that it will end up a two-tier view as I build it out over the next 12 months.
I think it's so interesting the roles of the C-suite. Like I honestly just could like sit here and talk to you forever about it because like I feel like every role is pivotal, but I feel like the most pivotal part of getting it right is the timing.
Yes, exactly. And also you can go too fast, right? So
Yeah.
I think my CEO, he's very experienced. Many companies he's bought and sold, and built. And, bringing on the experience, which was, let's call it big tech CRO, CPO,
Yeah.
helped him understand that rigor that I was putting in to make sure that these scalable systems turn into customer value, right? And the rigor and what we brought in on that whole front end GTM, I think it really opened up the board, his and the ELT's eyes to say, we potentially need to go look at that on the back end now. And yes, it's the back end, but it also connects significantly to the front end and helps the entire journey. So I think it probably happened faster than we thought, but for absolutely the right reasons. It's perfect timing.
Honestly, like I think by the way, I was part of a business that did the complete opposite and went far, far too quick. And we just hired so many C-suite and we just hired and hired and hired. This was in like, let's just burn cash era. So I've seen it work well and I've seen it like not work well. And it just literally comes down to that timing. So that's awesome. So just before we wrap, because I know this has been so good. Like I've loved all of our topics. Just going back to the start of the conversation, you win or you want to win early, right, as a CRO. So have you got any kind of like lasting like nuggets or anything that you can share with our listeners where on how to win early or how to win in the long term that CROs or aspiring CROs, because a lot of people that listen to this podcast are like in the VP level and want to get to that CRO level. Like we have a lot of like head of sales, VPs of sales. So for those types of personas that are looking for their next promotion, how do you confidently win early in the first like 8 months, like you like yourself?
I think I would put it down to a couple of really key points. I mean, we've talked about the 30, 60, 90s, but
Yeah,
let's get down to it, right? You're going to fail as a CRO, not because of reps, not because of anything. You're going to fail because you're fragmented.
of
Okay.
course.
That is the reason. So job one for me would always be unifying that sales CS marketing into one approach
Yeah,
as much as possible into one set of systems, clear KPIs, understand that. That would be driven by the data model that you create that one set of, or that those indicators that is one set of truth, right? That is really, really critical because if you can't, and this is something I say all the time, if you cannot explain simply to a board and a set of investors what you're doing and how you're doing it,
yeah,
they will return with the thought, this guy or lady does not understand it themselves. And then you're dead in the water. But
literally.
by taking something so simple as saying revenue is systematic, right? You basically need to take those silos out, you fix that up, and you take the friction away, and you have everyone running in the same direction that is out there effectively in GTM. You will just get win after win after win without even realizing it. You start to get wins. But I would always start there because when I joined, marketing was an events business, right? And they just ran events. And I said, well, what are we doing in those events? Where's the activations? Where's the story? Where's the campaign? Where's the podcast? Where's the thought leadership? What is it we're selling? Oh, well, no, that's over there. So
Yeah.
then so by controlling that, and that is the blessing and the curse of a CRO, you have all of that under your control, right? So get that, get those systems in place, get that rigor in place, understand what you're trying to achieve and be able to explain it simply. And then honestly, these systems outperform people, right? These processes outperform people. That's how I think about it.
I love it. Love the events thing. That's awesome. Honestly, Keith, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for your time. Like, I've got so many key takeaways and yeah, excited for this one to come out.
No, awesome. Really appreciate it. And you have a great weekend.
Thanks, Keith.